They went in, but no one ever came back. 5 real stories, 5 terrifying disappearances. Some were just looking for adventure. Others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now their silence haunts the places they were last seen. Story 1, the night we shouldn't have left. I was just 7 years old when it happened. We lived in a remote village nestled deep in the Amazon jungle, right on the border between Brazil and Peru. Life there was wild, beautiful, and raw. There were no streetlights, no phones, no cars, just the sounds of nature and the warmth of our tight-knit community. It was the kind of place where children could roam free, as long as they followed one simple rule: never go near the outer jungle at night. Everyone in the village knew about the danger. Terrorist groups, men with guns, masks, and no mercy often moved through the jungle. Trying to control the region, parents whispered about them in hushed voices. We kids weren't supposed to ask questions. We were just taught how to hide and run if something ever felt wrong. That night, the village was alive with music and firelight. It was a celebration, something like Halloween, only our own Amazonian version. My mother painted her face with bright tribal symbols and wrapped colorful feathers around her hair. I still remember the excitement in the air and how the drums echoed through the trees like distant thunder. All of us kids were gathered in a small wooden house at the edge of the village. It was our safe place while the adults danced and sang into the night. A 17-year-old girl was supposed to watch over us, but as soon as the parents were gone, she disappeared with her friends, leaving the door slightly open and the shadows creeping in. There were 6 of us, different ages, different families, but that night, we were one gang, and Leon, the oldest among us at 14, was our leader. He was fearless, wild, and always full of ideas. Most of the time they were stupid, but we loved following him. He told jokes, made up games, and kept us entertained. When the power would go out, and the only light came from our little lanterns, after a while we got bored. Carla, the loud and creative one, said, "Let's dress up like the grown-ups. Tribal makeup, feathers, everything." So we found leftover paint, old scarves, and dusty hats. Before long, we were all painted like jungle warriors, laughing, posing, and calling ourselves the Tribe of Kids. It was innocent, just fun, just imagination. Then Leon grinned and said the words that changed everything. "Let's go find a hidden treasure in the Amazon." We all laughed. We thought it was a game. Even I, the youngest, said yes. Within minutes, Leon had found a small wooden boat down by the riverbank. It was old and creaked when we stepped inside, but it floated. Somehow, he even found a working lantern. And just like that, 6 kids, barefoot, in tribal paint in the middle of the night, pushed off into the jungle river. We laughed, we splashed, we sang made-up songs about treasure and danger. The river felt like a magical path cutting through darkness, leading us to adventure. What none of us knew was that someone else was watching from the shadows. As we drifted deeper into the river, the jungle around us thickened. The laughter slowly faded. The trees leaned over the water like silent giants, and the insects' buzz became louder than our voices. We were still giggling, but underneath that, I remember feeling a strange chill, like the air itself was warning us to turn back. Then we saw it, a faint light moving through the trees, a flashlight or a lantern, and then a voice. "Who's there?" We froze. Leon immediately blew out our lantern and dropped it to the floor of the boat. "Get down," he whispered sharply. We did. All 6 of us lay flat on the wet wooden floor. My cheek pressed against the boat's edge, and I could feel my heart pounding like it would break my ribs. The sound of another boat grew closer, paddles slicing through the water, and then a harsh beam of light blinded us. "I see you. Stop hiding." A man's voice, low, cold, and amused. We slowly sat up. I will never forget what I saw. 4 men, all holding rifles, not hunters, not locals. These were terrorists, the very people we were told to avoid, the ones our parents feared. Their faces were hard, unshaven, eyes filled with a cruel kind of curiosity. Leon stood up. He was only 14, but in that moment he looked like a man. "We're sorry," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Our parents are expecting us at home. We got lost." The biggest man, wearing a red bandana and a machete strapped across. His chest chuckled darkly. Children in the jungle alone? You could disappear, and no one would ever find you. Carla began to cry. I think I was shaking. Then something happened. I still don't know why. Maybe it was our tribal paint. Maybe it was our size. Maybe it was luck. The man looked at us, grunted and said, "Won't go. You're just tribe babies." And they turned their boat and left. We didn't move for a long time. Then Leon, pale and sweaty, grabbed the paddle and shouted, "Row, now!" We rowed like never before, with trembling arms and soaked clothes, back toward the village. When we finally reached the dock, we didn't speak. We didn't cry anymore. We just locked the doors, pulled the curtains, and huddled together on the floor of the safe house. That night, none of us slept. And the next morning, we never told anyone. Not the elders, not our parents. We kept the secret for years. It wasn't until I was much older that I understood why they let us go. We looked like children from the local indigenous tribe, not from the village. We had no value to them. If they had known the truth, that our war paint was just for fun, that we were dressed up, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Story 2, The Man in the Mackinac. This happened a few years ago, during early spring, when the snow still blanketed the Rocky Mountains. Our group of 9 men, ranging in age from 18 to late 30s, would often meet up several times a year to work together on a remote property owned by a friend's family. It was a vast, secluded area high in the Colorado mountains at over 9,200 feet elevation. That weekend, we were doing forest maintenance, clearing brush, making fire breaks, and felling a few dead trees. It was tough work, but the kind that brings people closer. No cell service, no noise, just snow, sawdust, and brotherhood. After a long, exhausting day, someone suggested we hit the slope before heading back to camp. It was a favorite spot, a wide, snow-covered hillside with no trees or rocks. Perfect for tubing. One of the Gators 4x4 utility vehicles would tow a tube downhill, and we'd hang on for dear life, laughing all the way. Dumb? A little. Fun? Absolutely. We reached the slope around midnight. It was dark, no moon, just light snow falling, and our fire crackling weakly. The whiskey came out, and so did our inner kids. We took turns flying down the hill, screaming and crashing into snowbanks. Jeff, the youngest at 18, and new to the group, was getting the wildest rides. Swinging him near the tree line was part of his initiation. He was a good sport, though clearly a little rattled. Then something changed. We were winding down, getting ready to pack up, when Jeff froze in place, pale as the snow beneath him. He backed up slowly and whispered, "There's someone in the woods." At first we chuckled. Must have been a shadow or a low-hanging branch. But Jeff didn't laugh. He was shaking. I saw a man standing just a few feet into the trees. He was staring at me, didn't move. He was wearing one of those fur-lined trapper hats and a red plaid Mackinac coat. The joking stopped. Bob, the oldest of us, muttered, "Grab the rifles." Flashlights came on. We scanned the edge of the tree line, walking slowly, hearts pounding. Snow crunched under our boots. The woods were silent. We found nothing. No man. No footprints, just still snowy darkness. We chalked it up to whiskey, cold, and nerves. But Jeff didn't sleep a second that night. He sat by the fire with his coat zipped up to his chin, staring at the slope. The next morning, the mountains looked peaceful again, as if nothing strange had happened the night before. The sun lit up the snow-covered pines, and the silence felt almost too perfect. Jeff looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, still wrapped in his coat. We joked a little, just to lighten the mood, but he didn't say much. The group packed up, loaded the Gators, and drove down toward the main house on the property. From there, we planned to head into the small, nearby town for breakfast and say our goodbyes. About half an hour later, our trucks rolled into the diner parking lot. The usual chatter returned. Bacon, eggs, and black coffee did their job. Jeff seemed more relaxed. A few guys even teased him again about the ghost lumberjack in the woods. But that joke died quickly. On our way back toward the property, just as we turned off the public road onto the private dirt drive, we saw flashing lights, several police cruisers, and an ambulance. We stopped. Something serious had happened. One of the deputies recognized us and waved us over. He asked if we'd seen or heard anything strange up on the slope. The night before, that's when Bob mentioned Jeff's sighting and our brief search. The deputy nodded grimly and said, "The neighbors found a body in a ditch. Early this morning, we traced a set of footprints in the snow, led all the way from that slope to the ditch, based on the boot prints and coat description. We think it was the same guy your friend saw." We just stood there, stunned. It was real. Jeff hadn't imagined it. The deputy continued. "Looks like suicide. Single gunshot. Probably happened minutes after he was spotted. No ID yet, but he had a hunting rifle and a revolver. And yes, he was wearing a red plaid mackinaw, coat and a trapper's hat." Chills ran through all of us. That man had been just yards from us in the dark, watching, listening, maybe deciding something. We'll never know who he was or what he wanted. Was he just lost and broken? Or had he come there with something worse in mind? The thought that he may have been watching us for a long time before Jeff saw him still gives me nightmares. Jeff didn't come back on the next trip. Can't blame him. Even now, years later, when someone in the group mentions the slope, we all grow quiet. We still don't joke about the man in the Mackinac. He was real, and he was far too close. Story 3. The Night Ritual. In the winter of 2015, I was 19, and still living at my parents' house in a quiet rural village in Germany. My best friend, let's call her Mara, lived just 2 streets away. We had a little secret back then. We were both low-key smokers. Not proud of it, just a phase. Every night, after everyone went to bed, we'd meet up in one of our cars. We'd park somewhere quiet, smoke and talk about anything. School, family, life. It wasn't just about the cigarette. It became our ritual, something familiar, safe. On a cold December night, the air was damp with fog. I messaged Mara around midnight. "You up? Usual spot?" A few minutes later, she replied, "Yeah, I'm already in the car." I grabbed my jacket and quietly slipped out the front door, keys in hand, trying not to wake anyone. Our spot wasn't far, just down the road, near a narrow gravel path that curved behind an old barn. We liked it because no one ever walked by at that hour, and there were no streetlights, just the soft glow from the dashboard. When I pulled up, I saw her parked under the single tree. I got in, shut the door, and we lit up. The windows quickly fogged up with condensation. The heater was on low, and a soft song played from the radio. We chatted, laughed, then fell into that familiar, peaceful silence. But that night, something felt off. Mara turned down the volume and looked out her window. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I hadn't. I shook my head but leaned forward to listen. Crunch. It was faint but definitely there. The sound of footsteps on gravel, slow, deliberate. We both froze. "Maybe it's a fox?" I suggested, trying to sound normal. She didn't answer. Then, a second crunch. Closer now. My heart rate spiked. I turned the key in the ignition, ready to leave if needed. Mara slowly reached for her phone. Neither of us said a word. Then, out of the misty dark beyond the windshield, a figure appeared. It wasn't moving, just standing, watching. Too tall and still to be a child, too thin to be one of our neighbors. Mara whispered, almost breathless. "He wasn't there a second ago." We didn't move. My fingers were gripping the wheel so tight, they hurt. And that's when the figure took one slow step toward the car. As the shadowy figure stepped forward, the gravel beneath his shoes crunched louder, deliberate, slow, threatening. He didn't speak, didn't wave, just kept walking toward us with eerie calm, as if he knew exactly how terrified we were. Mara whispered, trembling, "Lock the doors." I reached over and hit the lock button. A dull click echoed inside the car, and suddenly the silence felt suffocating. My headlights were still off. We hadn't turned them on since arriving. But I flicked them now. Light flooded the gravel path, and the man vanished. He was no longer there. We both gasped. "What the hell?" I whispered. We scanned around frantically, hearts pounding. Then, a hand slapped against Mara's window with a deafening bang. She screamed, jerking back in her seat. I turned on the engine. The man's face appeared just outside her window, pale, expressionless. His eyes blank, like he wasn't even human. He didn't yell or say anything. He just stared, straight through the glass, as if he was waiting for something. I threw the car into reverse and sped backward, gravel flying. Mara cried out, "He's still there!" But I didn't look. I just drove as fast as I could out of the path, back toward the main road. When we reached the street light at the corner, I finally looked behind us. Nothing. No one. Just darkness and mist. We pulled over a few blocks away, both shaking uncontrollably. We didn't talk for several minutes, just sat there, breathing. Eventually, Mara whispered, "What did he want?" I had no answer. Neither of us ever saw that man again. We never told our parents, and we never met up at night in the car again. Even years later, when we bring it up, we still remember his face and the way he just watched, like we were prey and he was deciding when to strike. Story 4. The Forgotten House. When I was 21, I rented a small, old house in northern England with 2 friends, Tom and Emily. It was one of those countryside homes with creaky floors, narrow hallways, and a coldness that never really left. Even in summer, we weren't rich, and the rent was incredibly low, too low. But we were students and didn't ask too many questions. The landlord was an older woman who simply said, "Just don't use the room at the end of the hall." At first, we laughed it off. A forbidden room? It sounded like something from a horror movie. But when we moved in and opened every door, except that one, a strange feeling began to grow. That room was always cold. Even when the rest of the house was warm, that door felt like ice. And no matter how we tried to ignore it, we always noticed it was just slightly ajar, even after we'd closed it. One night, we had friends over for dinner and a few drinks. Everyone was curious about the forbidden room, and by midnight, curiosity won. Tom, half drunk, grabbed a flashlight and said, "Come on, what's the worst? That could happen." He pushed the door open. The air inside was stale and damp, as if the room had been sealed for decades. The walls were lined with shelves, and old children's toys sat silently, covered in a thin layer of dust. A rocking horse, a broken crib, faded drawings pinned to the wall. At the center was an antique mirror leaning against the wall, cracked but not shattered. Strange markings had been drawn across the glass, like someone tried to scratch out a reflection. Emily whispered, "Let's close it, please." But Tom stood there, frozen, staring into the glass. "There's something wrong with this." I was about to walk in when a sudden thud echoed from above us, from the attic. We all froze. The room had no ceiling access. There was no attic above that room, but we all heard it, clear as day. We stood there in silence, staring at the ceiling above the strange room. Another thud, louder this time. Emily backed away, whispering, "There's no attic above this room, is there?" Tom didn't answer. He was still staring at the mirror, his expression blank, almost absent. I stepped in and touched his shoulder. He flinched, like he'd just been pulled out of a trance. "I think we should leave," I said, trying to stay calm. "Now." We backed out of the room, closing the door slowly, and that awful coldness followed us into the hallway like a shadow. I don't know why, but I locked the door. It just felt safer. That night, none of us slept. Around 3 a.m., I heard something, the sound of a rocking horse creaking back and forth, slowly, rhythmically. It was coming from the end of the hall. I woke Tom and Emily. We all stood in the hallway, barefoot and shaking. The sound stopped. Suddenly, the door handle moved, as if something on the other side had grabbed it and was slowly turning it. We didn't wait. We grabbed what we could, rushed out of the house, and sat in Tom's car until sunrise. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The next morning, we went back to collect our things. Everything in that room was gone. The toys, the mirror, even the shelves. Just a completely empty room, clean and freshly painted, as if none of it had ever been there. The landlord didn't act surprised. She simply said, "I warned you. Some doors should stay closed." We moved out that same day. It's been years since then, but I still remember Tom's face in the mirror. That blank expression, like something inside him had left. He never really talked about it afterward. None of us did, but every now and then, I have dreams of that mirror. And sometimes, I see my reflection looking back at me, doing something I'm not. Story 5. The woman in the static Zoe wasn't the type to believe in ghosts. After her messy divorce, she just wanted peace, a fresh start. So, when she found a cheap apartment on the edge of town with creaky floors and faded wallpaper, it felt quiet, safe, maybe even healing. The place came partially furnished, a sagging couch, a flickering lamp, and an old box-style TV from the 1980s sitting on the floor of the living room, thick dust on its screen. Zoe didn't think much of it. She didn't even plug it in. For the first few nights, things were fine. She'd fall asleep reading, wake up to the sound of birds, and sip her morning tea by the window. The silence of the apartment felt like a gift. But by the end of the first week, something changed. One night around 2:08 a.m., Zoe woke up to a soft humming sound, low and steady, like static, groggy. She padded barefoot into the living room. The old TV was on, not playing anything, just static, black and white fuzz, no signal. Zoe froze. She was sure she hadn't touched it. The plug had still been out, hadn't it? She moved slowly toward the screen. The white noise buzzed louder the closer she got. Just as she reached to turn it off, she saw something. Not on the screen. In it. A shape. A figure. Faint, but definitely there. A woman. Standing in a shadowed hallway. Long hair. Thin shoulders. Not moving. But watching? Zoe blinked hard. The image flickered, then disappeared into more fuzz. She yanked the plug from the wall. The screen went dark instantly. Her heart thudded, but she told herself it was just exhaustion, a trick of the light. Maybe a reflection, maybe. The next morning, she didn't mention it to anyone. What would she say? The unplugged TV turned itself on? Even she knew how that sounded. But as she made her coffee, she passed by the now blank screen and noticed something else. In the dust across the screen were fingerprints, not hers. Zoe couldn't stop thinking about the fingerprints. They were too small to be hers, too delicate, almost childlike. But she lived alone. No one had visited her in weeks, and she hadn't touched the screen. Since moving in, she cleaned it off, told herself it was nothing, maybe some leftover marks from the previous tenant. That night, she went to bed early, determined not to get spooked again. But at 3:11 a.m. she woke up. The static was back. It wasn't loud. It was low, like a whisper at the edge of her hearing. Enough to pull her from sleep, but not enough to make her scream. She walked back to the living room. The TV was on again, still unplugged. This time, the screen wasn't just showing a hallway. It was showing her hallway, Zoe's own apartment hallway. As if the screen had become a mirror, but it wasn't reflecting her. It was too dark, too slow. That's when she saw it. A woman, standing where Zoe had just walked. Same hair, same build, except her skin looked too pale, her smile too wide, her head tilted just slightly to the left, like it had been broken and never reset. And the worst part? She started walking toward the screen, toward her. Zoe backed away, heart racing. She blinked and the woman was now closer. Blink, closer. Now Zoe could hear breathing, not hers. From behind her, she spun around. No one. When she turned back to the screen, the woman was gone. The hallway was empty again, but the TV remained on, flickering softly, even though the power cord still dangled, unplugged. Zoe finally did what she should have done days ago. She covered the TV with a blanket, hauled it outside, and left it next to the dumpster. But that night she couldn't sleep. At exactly 3:11 a.m., her phone lit up. A notification. Screen mirroring connected. Bedroom display active. She didn't have a second screen. Slowly, trembling, she turned her head to the corner of the bedroom, to the black mirror of her turned-off television. It was glowing, just static, and in the static, a face. Some places hide more than just memories. These 5 stories remind us that danger can be silent, sudden, and unsolved. They were just ordinary people, but something or someone out there made sure they never returned. So next time you step into the unknown, ask yourself, will you come back?